Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming our guest of honor, Minister for Sustainability and the Environment, Ms. Grace Fu. Good afternoon, Minister Grace Fu, CDL Group CEO, Mr. Sherman Kwek, NParks CEO, Mr. Kenneth Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Firstly, a happy Climate Action Week to everyone in this room, and welcome. And welcome to the opening reception of Change the Present, Save the Future, a climate action exhibition. My name is Charlotte May, and I will be your MC for today. Now, as the world faces climate and health emergencies, the urgency of climate action has never been more evident. Sustainability has become a top global priority, and the collaboration of public, private, and people sectors is key to achieving a greener future. Now, the Singapore Green Plan 2030 highlights the nation's commitment to tackling climate change, serving as a stellar example of the critical role that governments play in rallying bold and collective action. Singapore is truly a city in nature with green spaces everywhere, much like the Singapore Botanic Gardens, where the CDL Green Gallery is located. A partnership between NParks and CDL, the Climate Action Exhibition spotlights global, national, industry, and people efforts to tackle climate change. Now, before we unveil the exciting exhibition, it is my great pleasure to invite CDL Group CEO, Mr. Sherman Kwek, to deliver his opening remarks. Mr. Kwek, please.
I was still a little bit confused as to whether we can take off our masks, but I did just obtain permission from Minister Grace Fu, so I think I'll take it off. And thank you again, Charlotte. I think the last time we saw you was at that EcoBank fashion show, right? Back in 2019, I think 2 years ago. So thank you for being the MC today. So, okay. Guest of honor, Ms. Grace Fu, Minister for Sustainability and the Environment, Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, very good afternoon to you all. On behalf of City Developments Limited, or CDL as we are known, and our partner, NParks, CEO Kenneth there, I would like to thank you for joining us, be it in person or via virtual platforms, for the opening of this Change the Present, Save the Future exhibition. Taking a trip down memory lane, back in 1995 when we first started this sustainability journey under our then late Deputy Chairman, Mr. Kwek Ling Ju, people said we were crazy. I mean, seriously, those were the comments we received. You're nuts. What's this you're talking about? Back then, I think when you talk about green and sustainability and conserving the environment, people said, oh, this is the domain for people who don't understand anything about business and harbor idealistic dreams. So it was quite a tough time back then, but undeterred, I think the late Mr. Kwek made sustainability a core value within our corporate culture, and also establish our ethos that we still embody up till today, which is conserving as we construct, because we're in the real estate sector. In fact, actually, back in 2013, when we presented the CDL Green Gallery, which we'll proceed on to later, as a small, humble gift to this nation, even back then, 2013, I still remember so-called sustainability, going green was not really yet a mainstream agenda in the political and business arenas, So, thankfully, I think we at CDL, we persevered for almost 3 decades. And now people don't really call us crazy anymore. They actually call us visionary. So thank God for that. And, I'm very glad we managed to continue the late Mr. Quek's sustainability legacy. And of course, this would not have been possible without Esther, our dear Chief Sustainability Officer. So maybe some applause for her. Esther started the journey with our late Mr. Quek, back then in '95, and now 26 years on, she's still with us. Esther may not be that pleased with me saying that because it might illustrate her age, but it's okay, Esther, you joined us when you were 18 years old, right? So, yeah, okay. Today, there is much greater awareness on climate issues, but unfortunately, the world is already in a dire climate emergency. I mean, no other way to put it. It's a real serious emergency we're in. Since the signing of the 2015 Paris Agreement, all the way till the end of 2019, unfortunately, it's very disappointing to see that carbon emissions have just continued to increase every year. Scientists say that carbon emissions must fall by about 7.6% annually in order for us to achieve this ambitious 1.5 degree temperature rise cap scenario by 2030. Some people say it's already too late, we can't achieve it, and in fact, if you look at last year, right, I mean, which was a really tragic year for us, I mean, when the world almost came to a complete halt, even then, last year, carbon emissions only decreased by 7%. So this highlights just how bad the situation is. So, as you can see, the planet is just heating up too fast, too much, and we really have to step up and do more. The last 7 years have been the hottest years on record for the whole world. In fact, for our own dear nation, Singapore, the last 5 years have also been the hottest years on record. So certainly not going in the right direction. So indeed, I think 2021 is a critical year for us to kickstart a decade of action, I think, to mitigate and adapt to these climate challenges. The world is undeniably facing an unprecedented climate crisis, and for businesses, it's no longer just about the single bottom line centered on profit, and in particular, for the sector that I belong to, which is the built environment sector, the BE sector, this sector has a very, very significant global carbon footprint. Cities, including infrastructure and buildings, occupy approximately 2% of the land mass on Earth, but account for 70% of the greenhouse gas emissions. So our industry certainly is a big contributor to that. I think one big challenge will be how do we decarbonize existing buildings? One study showed that 2/3 of the buildings that exist today will still be here in the year 2050, right? So therefore, it really emphasizes we need to have a considerable increase in the pace of retrofitting and upgrading these buildings in order to meet the goals, climate goals set out in the Paris Agreement. Last year, the global pandemic led to the awakening that the health of the planet, the people, and the economies, everything is all interdependent. Over a year later, we do see a greater convergence of commitment and determination, at the global, national, and business levels, I think, to combat climate change. So this is a good thing. Right now, obviously, there's that global race towards a net zero carbon economy, and that has actually attained support from 120 countries, 31 regions, over 730 cities and counting. So, I think it is critical and timely for us to expand the engagement and outreach to more communities to create the sustainable future that we want. This CDL Green Gallery, which you will see later, has been playing this role to influence people beyond borders, sectors, age groups, and cultures. It's a major collaboration, I think, between CDL and NParks. It is Singapore's first zero energy gallery, powered solely by solar energy. It was designed and built with low environmental impact and innovative sustainable building materials, such as the bio-based hempcrete for the external walls. Just as a fun fact, hempcrete is actually made from a combination of the hemp plant as well as so-called derivatives of limestone. Hemp, of course, as you all know, is also called cannabis or marijuana, right? So, and it's a great material actually because it's a very lightweight insulating material. I think that's ideal for all sorts of climate conditions, and it combines good insulation and thermal mass. And then it's considered a very environmentally friendly product because it actually absorbs CO2 and is therefore a carbon storing material. So, but anyway, don't fret, don't panic. You know, the so-called psychoactive components within the hempcrete is already very low, so you're not going to get a natural high when you walk through the gallery later. Since the opening of the gallery in 2013 by Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong, you know, we've averaged around 30,000 visitors a year, and we've done about 17 exhibitions, you know, across diverse subjects related to climate, nature, biodiversity, and gardening. For instance, in commemoration of our nation's so-called bicentennial in 2019, we did this exhibition entitled Singapore's Greening Journey, 200 Years and Beyond. And while I'm on this point, I thought I'll also just bring up a little bit more of publicity for CDL, which is another platform I think we use to engage the public and promote, I think, climate action, is the Singapore Sustainability Academy, or SSA for short. Many of you in this room, I know, have been there and attended our events there, so thank you for that. It is built on an open deck at our mall, City Square Mall. It's designed and built by us together with our industry partners in 2017. It's also a zero energy facility solely powered by solar energy, just like the Green Gallery. Comprises the most extensive partnership with the support of 6 government agencies and 15 founding partners and NGO partners as well. It's a Green Mark Platinum building, and the structure was built with over 80% sustainable materials, including cross-laminated timber and glued laminated timber, which were verified by the Nature's Barcode from reliable sources, responsible sources. So since its opening, the SSA, proud to announce the SSA has hosted more than 450 sustainability-related training programs and advocacy events, and reached out to close to 20,000 delegates. So, you know, over the years, I think we have witnessed, we've really witnessed the power of people in driving positive change in environmental conservation. Thanks to Esther, we have also established a Women for Green network that some of you are also part of, that empowers women to drive sustainable practices at work, at home, and at play. And this has been gaining a lot of traction. We also have our Youth for Climate activities and events, as well as many other youth activities that hopefully have nurtured many young eco-champions of tomorrow. So as a firm believer of partnership, our multi-stakeholder collaborative programs have helped us to amplify our influence amongst our value chain and the community at large. In this exhibition that you will see later, which runs from this July to March next year, we have united with our global and local partners in climate action, including the World Green Building Council, Resilient Cities Network, C40, Urban Land Institute, Asia Pacific Real Estate Association, Global Compact Network Singapore, and many more. CDL takes pride in being a strong supporter of global and national climate goals and the UN Sustainable Development Goals. In 2018, CDL was recognized by the UN Global Compact as the SDG pioneer in green infrastructure and low carbon economy. Taking our commitment one step further, we joined the Race to Zero global campaign. This February, you know, I'm also happy to announce we became the first real estate conglomerate in Southeast Asia to sign the World Green Building Council's net zero carbon buildings commitment. So anyway, back to the exhibition. enough about CDL. We hope all visitors to this exhibition will be inspired by the diverse range of sustainability issues and transformative climate efforts, including, we centered around a lot of material also on the global race to zero, as well as the Singapore Green Plan 2030, which Minister Foo can obviously elaborate a lot more about. And given, as I mentioned earlier, the built environment's high environmental impact, we are also pleased to share our country's green building efforts that support the transition to a low carbon and circular economy. This exhibit showcases voices and aspirations for change by people from all walks of life, including young students to NGOs and prominent leaders in the public and private sectors, as well as the diplomatic community. You'll be pleasantly surprised to see a collection of amazing nature photos captured in Singapore by hobbyists amongst C-suite leaders, homemakers, retiree, and youths. Unfortunately, you won't see any of my photos. I guess my photography needs work. Didn't make the cut. So it is our wish that visitors from different parts of the world will leave the exhibition feeling empowered to effect change in their everyday lives and bring the global climate goals closer to reality. Time is ticking, and every effort will contribute towards moving the needle. As I've always said to people, right, I think it's very easy for us to take the lackadaisical approach and say that, hey, climate change is other people's problem, it's not my problem. But you know what? The truth is, it is everyone's problem, right? I mean, it is everyone's problem. But therein also lies the solution, because together we can all make a difference. So in closing, Singapore's ambition, I think, to become a city in nature and move towards a low carbon future is most timely. I would like to extend our heartfelt appreciation to Minister Grace Fu for officiating the opening of this exhibition, and we look forward to her insightful sharing later in a panel discussion together with other expert speakers, such as High Commissioner Lynn McDonald, Mr Max Loh, and Mr R Raghunathan. To our valued partner, NParks, Kenneth, and your team, thank you for yet another great collaboration, and all this would not have been possible without your strong support and help. And of course, to our guests, all of our guests, thank you for progressing on this journey with us and for pursuing your aspirations for a more sustainable and healthier planet. We hope you will enjoy the program that we have prepared for you this afternoon. So, as a final statement, I would say that, with greater awareness, stronger action, and more collaboration, we can indeed change the present and save the future together. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kwek, for sharing CDL's pioneering vision and long-standing commitment to greening the built environment, as well as your efforts in public, private, and people partnerships in Singapore and beyond. I myself have personally worked with CDL a number of times on their sustainability projects, and in my experience, they have all been very impactful. Now, collaboration is key to supporting Singapore's vision of building a sustainable future. The Ministry for Sustainability and the Environment, MSE for short, is playing a lead role in realizing this vision. In fact, this week marks the third Climate Action Week in Singapore. It is an annual initiative by MSE to rally people and communities to take collective climate action and secure a sustainable future for Singapore. In line with the Singapore Green Plan 2030, the theme this year is City of Green Possibilities. Now, I'm sure many of you in our audience today are very keen to hear more about Singapore's green vision. And it is now my honor to invite on stage Minister Fu for her keynote address. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlotte. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I think I'm very delighted to be here and excited to see so many of you. This is the first few physical meeting that I've attended for many, many months. So I'm sure you and like me are very excited to be together with people again instead of just watching them on screen. And also like to see so many of the staff and event organizers as well, photographers that we have not seen for a long, long time. I think we have all been pivoting from physical to virtual and back to physical in various forms over the last 15 months. It has been a tough journey. We are still in the race, but I think we're beginning to see light in the end of tunnel. And it's only possible with the collaboration and cooperation of everyone in the country. And we have been really great following our instruction on SMM and vaccination and so on. So for being so accommodative and also being so collaborative with us, the government likes to thank all of you for really being a resilient people here. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank CDL first for inviting me to launch this Change the Present, Save the Future exhibition held in collaboration with NParks. Much has been said about climate change and how it has impacted countries around the world. In recent years, we have witnessed an increasing occurrence of extreme weather events globally, from heavy rainfalls and large storms to heat waves. I'm sure many have seen this 50 degrees C Death Valley photo that is really sending a message to us on a daily basis, as well as droughts in California and wildfires. Singapore is no exception. As a low-lying city-state, we are vulnerable to rising sea levels and extreme weather patterns. Based on our estimates, sea levels could rise by more than 1 meter by 2100, which is particularly concerning given that 30% of our island is less than 5 meters above sea level. The consequences of inaction are very real. More frequent extreme weather conditions will increase the risk of loss of properties and biodiversity, affect the global food and water supply, and public health with the emergence of new diseases. Unless we act fast, the world will head towards a bleak future. Over the years, Singapore has implemented a wide set of adaptation and mitigation measures to fight climate change. These include extensive investments in drainage networks, investments in our public transport system, and the implementation of carbon tax, to name a few. On the international front, Singapore submitted our enhanced 2030 nationally determined contribution and our long-term low emissions development strategy in 2020. In order to achieve our long-term net zero emissions aspirations as soon as viable, the government launched the Singapore Green Plan 2030 in February this year. The Green Plan is a whole-of-nation movement to advance Singapore's national agenda on sustainable development. Building on our past and current sustainability efforts, the Green Plan sets out ambitious and concrete targets for the next 10 years to strengthen our commitments under the UN Sustainable Development Agenda and Paris Agreement. And let me share some examples of what we are doing. First, we are improving the energy efficiency of our buildings, which account for over 20% of our emissions. Under the Green Plan, we have the 80-80-80 target, that is to green 80% of our buildings by 2030, push for 80% of new buildings to be super low energy buildings, and for best-in-class green buildings to see an 80% improvement in energy efficiency levels. Thank you. Second, we will work towards a green economy and harness sustainability as an engine for jobs and growth. We aim to attract companies to develop new sustainability solutions and anchor their research and development activities here. The government will also introduce an enterprise sustainability program to help local SMEs develop capabilities in sustainability. It's just like how we're encouraging SMEs to adopt digitalization. Sustainability will be a horizontal that we hope to be promoted to all SMEs. Third, we will create a green, livable, and sustainable home for Singaporeans by extending nature throughout our island. In the next decade, we will double our tree planting efforts to plant 1 million trees across Singapore and increase Nature Park's land area by over 50% over the next decade. Our goal is to add 1,000 hectares of green spaces by 2035, and this is equivalent to more than 1,800 football fields. Fourth, we will enhance our flood resilience and strengthen our food security. PUB has embarked on the first of a series of coastal protection studies along the city east coast to identify and develop solutions to protect us from rising sea levels. The Singapore Food Agency is also working with stakeholders on the Lim Chu Kang Master Plan to transform the area into a high-tech, high-productivity food hub from 2024. The aim is to increase our capability and capacity to produce 30% of our nutritional needs in a resource-optimal and sustainable manner. Finally, to address e-waste, packaging waste, and food waste, we will promote reduce, reuse, and recycle as a norm for citizens and businesses. The Extended Producer Responsibility, or EPR scheme for e-waste was implemented this month and will be expanded to cover packaging waste by 2025. The National Environment Agency is also working with industry partners on feasibility studies for chemical recycling and a plastic recycling facility with an aim to improve our plastics recycling rate. Driving these sustainability initiatives requires a whole-of-nation effort. Earlier this week, I announced that the government will lead by example with a new GreenGov.sg movement. Under the GreenGov.sg, the public sector will strive to attain a new set of ambitious targets in order to cut and peak carbon emissions around 2025, ahead of the national target. It will incorporate environmental sustainability into its core functions and seek to catalyze green practices in the private sector. We're thankful for the support of partners from the 3P sectors, which are with us on Singapore's sustainability journey. This week is Climate Action Week. More than 60 partners have joined us to organize over 130 activities to help raise awareness of climate change and sustainability issues, and rally the public to take collective action for the environment. This Climate Action exhibition is one of the many interesting initiatives lined up this week, and I'm glad to hear that CDL has even created a virtual 3D version of the exhibition to widen its reach to both local and foreign visitors. Let me conclude by congratulating CDL and NParks for launching this meaningful exhibition. I'd also like to thank CDL for being such a steward in sustainability for the built environment. I encourage everyone to visit this exhibition, either in person or online, and hope that it will inspire all of us to build a more sustainable Singapore for the future. Thank you very much, and I look forward to a discussion with you later on.
Thank you, Minister Fu. Please remain on stage as we will now begin the panel discussion. I would now like to invite on stage Ms. Esther An, CDL's Chief Sustainability Officer, who will be moderating the session. Also, I would like to invite on stage the panelists, Ms. Lynn McDonald, High Commissioner of Canada to Singapore, Mr. R Raghunathan, CEO of Worldwide Fund for Nature Singapore, Mr. Max Loh, EY Singapore and Brunei Managing Partner, and EY ASEAN IPO Leader. Welcome. Now, the panel discussion is titled Building a Sustainable Future, Collaboration Beyond Borders and Sectors. It will explore how we can work together to co-create solutions and step up collaborative action across sectors and borders, all for a sustainable and livable world. Over to you now, Ms. An.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, and good afternoon for guests who are joining us online or in person. A really exciting time. And well, we heard the speeches from our CEO, Chairman, and also Minister. No single entity can save the world alone. So definitely we need collaboration, we need to speed up action across borders, across industries, across age groups and cultures as well. And today we are very, very honored to have this panel. And apart from Minister, and we have High Commissioner Lynn McDonald representing the diplomatic thoughts and views. And we have Raghu, WWF CEO, and well, he will be the spokesman for nature conservation, biodiversity, and of course, businesses can play a key role in actually saving the world as well. And we have Max Loh, who sits on board of many advisory to public and also private sector, and will represent the business perspective as well. So I think we have heard a lot about climate emergency, and we heard a lot of collaborations needed and all that. But the million-dollar question is how, are there challenges, are there opportunities for us to step up action? And I would like to, a little bit of warm-up for all the panelists to share from their perspective and, what they see about climate change and climate action. What are the broad sense of challenges and opportunities from their respective area. Then we will deep dive into the important aspects of climate action. Minister, shall we have you to help us to, elaborate a little bit on the, the so-called challenges and opportunities you have observed, and, from the public sector. And Monday, I was actually listening to your speech, and very excited to hear public sectors are really walking the talk, doing more. And maybe you can share a little bit more before we deep dive into other section. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I think the biggest challenges right now is probably finances. Products and services that is built for sustainability tend to cost more. And in a post-COVID world, when many countries, many companies are struggling with physical and financial challenges, some of them building for greener future may be a challenge because they're dealing with the now and then problem. So for some countries, really COVID has drained their finances tremendously. And to talk about investments in bigger, better infrastructure, sometimes it's just a little bit too far away for them. So this is the biggest challenge right now. How do we bring cost competitive, optimal solutions to countries, to companies that are struggling financially? Second problem, which is technological gap. There are solutions out there. Some of them are not quite near commercialization. Some of them are there, but they need to scale in order to be cost competitive. How do we bring that into reality? But therein lies all these opportunities that's out there. Whatever challenges that we are seeing represents opportunities for us. Countries that's looking for growth opportunity, for recovery, precisely has this opportunity now to build better. So if you are investing in infrastructure, if you are pump priming, what better opportunity now than to build for the future in a sustainable way? So we think that this is also where either a regional cooperation, multilateral cooperation can come in, and definitely mobilization of financial resources, either at investments, companies level, or at the government level, I think will bring a lot of good to companies, to countries that are looking for that help. Similarly, when it comes to technology, I think many of them are actually at the verge of taking off. Now, how do we provide the impetus, that scale of the market that allows many of them to come in and fill the gap? I think this is where exciting moments present for ourselves. And the reason why GreenGov.sg is an exciting pillar for us is because it's actually signal to the private sector that the government will use its purchasing budget to good use. So not only are we saying that we want to include sustainability in our evaluation criteria, we are also expanding the scope of the previous versions of green.sg. We were looking at government offices, mainly ministries, but with this initiative now, we are expanding the scope. We are including a lot more organizations. So for example, the AUs, the hospitals that were previously not under the ministries directly, now, they will also be included in the green.sg. We are also looking at raising the standards so that as we go out to requests for technology solutions, we are raising the bar for the industry. Our hope is that by doing so, we are putting money to catalyze the advancement and maturity of the markets for the products and services.
Thank you, Minister. High Commissioner, well, we heard that sad news about Canada, experiencing very unusual heat wave and all. I'm sure you have a lot of thoughts about, the real threats of urgency of climate emergency. So maybe you want to give us a broad perspective of, what you feel about it and also the threats and the opportunities. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Esther, Minister Fu, and colleagues. It's an honor to be on the panel and having family and friends on the west coast of Canada who have been sending daily reports of the extreme temperatures in the Pacific Northwest this year. It's really underscored the fact that we are facing a real climate emergency. I would say as a Canadian, sometimes in the past we might have joked that we have such long, cold winters that we like to take advantage of whatever summer heat comes our way. But with the fact of the forest fires, deaths from heat stroke, cooling centers having to be established in the country, it's made any sort of, I guess, thought on people's mind that maybe climate change isn't really real, or that somehow in Canada, given the richness of our resources, we might be able to protect ourselves from climate change. It's really removed all of those kind of thoughts and really seized this kind of attention of I'd say the whole population, registering that we're facing a real threat, whether it's human health and the various mentioned by the Minister, human health, rising water levels, loss of traditional hunting grounds, wildlife, economic repercussions, and so on. So I think what's happened for us, and I think many countries, is a sense of it's now time to take action. We have to get to net zero, and that's where opportunities come for, as the Minister noted, cooperation internationally, multilaterally, but also when it comes to sharing technology between countries. And I think as both countries involved also in the Arctic Council, Singapore and Canada have a role to play to say that even in very vulnerable territories, the repercussions of change to the climate in the Arctic will have an impact on all of us. So I think, as the Minister well said, it's threat but also opportunity, and Canada certainly looks forward to playing its part. And I know my esteemed diplomatic colleagues also in this room, I think I would venture to say would feel the same way. Thank you.
Thank you. Raghu, WWF, okay, you are really a property, to save wildlife and all. Just now, High Commissioner also said that the fire, forest fire, really is a threat of wildlife and all. So from WWF perspective, what is your thoughts about how urgent is climate emergency? What is really the threats and what are the opportunities you see from the civil society's perspective?
So, Esther, thank you for the question. Climate change, as we all know, is an existential threat for all of mankind and also for all of the flora and fauna that exists on Earth. So climate change and loss of biodiversity are totally interlinked. Both of them have been caused through human activity over the years. The two primary reasons that come out, firstly, are deforestation. And deforestation has been carried out by human beings for many, many centuries. And now it has come to the point that it has become unsustainable, whether it be for agricultural purposes or whether it be for developing infrastructure. So this sort of deforestation really results in climate emergency also, because a lot of carbon is released. The other area which causes the climate emergency is the extraction of fossil fuels, and that also results in high level of carbon emissions. So the world is at a very critical juncture. Our Living Planet report that was issued by WWF in 2020 shows that 2/3 of the planet species have become extinct in the last 50 years. So it's a very dire state of affairs. So the world needs to act now. And we are happy to see that in Singapore, we are able to work with local partners in collaboration, such as NParks, on the 1 Million Trees movement, or to support their efforts in the COP15 summit on biodiversity that is going to happen in Kunming later this year.
Max, at the World Economic Forum, the annual Global Risk Survey in January this year, again, 5 out of top 10 global risks are climate related. So climate risks are actually business risks and investment risks. So how urgent it is, climate emergency, and what are the impacts, on businesses?
Well, the short answer, Esther, is obviously very urgent. I think we're really at the tipping point here, and we all have talked about it. Minister has mentioned it. I just want to speak a bit about from a business perspective, because we must understand that businesses are invariably the source of carbon emissions. That's no other way to say it. And therefore, they must have a responsibility to act. Accordingly, it's about collaboration with governments, with people, and etc., because they also have the financial resources, the technological capabilities, and the global reach and innovative capacity to find solutions. And you can talk about nascent solutions right now, but how do you make it commercialized and broad-based? As an example, the firm that I currently work at is a global organization. We've set ourselves various targets, just like governments have, just as certain other businesses have. Not because we want to go and boast about it to the world, but as an accounting firm, we always also believe that what doesn't get measured doesn't get done. So it's important to put out these targets, and our goal really is to be carbon negative in 2021 and net zero by 2025. It's easier because we are not involved in manufacturing and everything else. But we hope that that will also inspire other businesses to come on board and to follow those targets and then work on various solutions. And in our capacity working with many, many businesses, we see more and more such businesses setting these targets. And that's a good first step. It's not the end game, obviously. Then, how do we go about doing it? We were having a sidebar conversation, Esther, prior to this panel discussion. We're speaking to the pyramid here, the people who are converted. What about the next layer? And even if these next layers of businesses can be talked to and convinced, do they really know how to do it? So are those questions that we really have to ask ourselves to move the entire ecosystem together forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, certainly. And in fact, last year, the world was battling, the pandemic. But one thing, one silver lining that we saw was actually an acceleration of climate action and greater convergence of will on the international, national, and the business, and even civil societies. So just now we mentioned about a race to zero. And in June, we actually just, marked the 1-year mark of this campaign. Apart from the 120 countries, 733 cities, there are actually 3,000 over businesses and many, investors are part of it. So we want to, hear the diverse view from each panelist. Maybe we can have High Commissioner first, because Canada is one of the earliest countries to sign on this race to zero. Plus, a few provinces have already put in place, whether it is Vancouver or Quebec, they already either put in place or planning to commit to race to zero. Do you wish to share some of the best practices, in your country? Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so thank you, Esther. And I think when we're looking at how do we achieve the race to net zero, I think we're viewing it from a combination of legislation that would bind current and future governments to those commitments. And so, for example, there's an act that's been put before our House of Commons that would say. We're putting into law what the actions and steps that are going to be taken to achieve those targets will be, in a sense of increasing transparency and accountability, so that citizens can hold the government to account if we're not meeting the targets, and also explaining how that's going to happen, whether it's by planting more trees in a manner similar to Singapore to scrub carbon in that way, or whether it's through technology for carbon capture in other areas. There'll be independent oversight as well, so not reliant solely on the government to say that it's met its targets, but others to observe and comment and try and refine if we're not meeting our goals quickly enough. But then it's also what we've also spoken about, which is the collaboration and partnerships in an international sense, but also at the community level, where I think often it's the communities and the local level that will understand and better be able to take action that's relevant to their communities and make those areas more resilient, rather than it necessarily being imposed from, say, a federal government level. Back in Ottawa, it's often in the provinces where the people will have distinct ideas about how to achieve the targets in their localities, and I think that builds motivation and a sense of ownership in trying to meet the targets, as opposed to having it be somebody else's problem. And in that regard, it's also with the private sector, with non-governmental organizations. So, two quick examples is we have our hydrogen fuel cell associations in Canada and Singapore have agreed to work together to share information on some of that technology, as well as our water associations. And then also we've enjoyed our partnership with CDL and the NEA and PUB to raise awareness about what people can do on a day-to-day basis in terms of plastic use. So this was a couple of years ago, pre-pandemic, but we were able to put, with your support, Esther, put on the Phobia exhibit at the Sustainability Gallery at Marina Barrage, which I think brought home to people just how much plastic is produced in a hawker center on a daily basis. We wouldn't have been able to do that without the support of CDL, and I think that helped to sort of show how community engagement is another way that we can try in Canada and in other countries to meet our targets. Thank you.
Thank you, High Commissioner. Max, just now you talked broadly about, we have reached the tipping point or already passed the tipping point. So High Commissioner talked about the legislation and all that. But I think last year we saw a really drastic, rise of ESG investing. ESG funds almost tripled last year, and the volume of sustainable finance, the bond and all that, doubled that of last year. So there must be some things, that drivers behind businesses, investors, and even financiers to step up on action. So maybe he wants to elaborate a little bit more on the business case and what are the drivers that push all this action, why investors see it as ESG is really now a key consideration. Yeah, do you want to elaborate?
Sure. So I think this issue is quite multi-layered. Regulations obviously play a part, because that, if take on carbon pricing, for example, that's legislation. It helps. Every piece of thing that comes along is an important cog in the entire machinery. And then you've got the government taking leads. That's not regulation, but they're taking the lead, like green.gov, important, because the government is always seen as the leader, if you will, in various other initiatives. And then businesses themselves. I think there's definitely a sustainability awakening amongst businesses as they show up their focus on ESG, not just as a good to have, but as a business imperative. So it's positive because a lot of businesses have also announced commitments to significantly cut carbon emissions and to reach net zero. But we're not there yet. So other than carbon pricing adoption, we have this whole area, for example, sustainable finance. There are a lot of alliances that have been formed globally, and people have committed and pledged, from an investor's point of view, to transition their portfolios to net zero emissions. And we're talking about a lot of money, in the trillions of dollars, in terms of all organizations that have pledged their support for this. So all that is also an important part of it in terms of pushing businesses. And it's also about engaging these companies or the investee companies that they invest in to improve governance, to curb emissions, and strengthen climate-related financial disclosures. All of this is part of that ecosystem that's going to drive businesses forward to that end game.
Mm-hmm. Yes, certainly. Yeah, and in fact, all the supporters that sign on to the Race to Zero represent 50% of the global GDP. Yeah. And 25% of greenhouse gas emission. They are really movers and shakers and all. And Raghu, what do you see civil society's role and action can drive and accelerate movement? Yeah.
I think we are very fortunate to be in Singapore, where the government is very forward-looking and proactive. It is really amazing with what Singapore has done to come out with the Singapore Green Plan 2030. It sets a very clear roadmap of action for all of society, whether it be it individuals, community members, public sector, private sector, non-governmental organizations, and having such a clear roadmap which is aligned to the cause of nature and conservation is absolutely critical. We are wholehearted supporters of this green plan, and it gives us a great opportunity for us to work collaboratively with different segments of society and with businesses to take strides in moving towards sustainability and mitigating the impact of climate change.
Okay, well, for the audience on Zoom, please feel free to send in your questions. In fact, we already have quite a few questions that I will weave into the discussion. And Minister, this is very timely now that we mentioned about the Green Plan. We mentioned about how government can partner with private sectors. And we also talk about carbon pricing. Yeah, so I think we are looking at also, apart from large cap, we also have a lot of SMEs that represent almost 80% of employment in the world and 90% of the GDP and all that. So how do you, as government, can help to bring the SME into the game? And also, there's one question here from the audience. It says that carbon tax internalize the externalities of carbon emissions. However, it also places a financial cost on company, which may be passed to consumers. So how do we ensure that a carbon tax does not affect Singapore's global competitiveness? And a carbon tax does not affect the low-income communities disproportionately? Yeah,
that's a very good question. I mean, that's really the challenge that the government has. Singapore, if you look at our carbon emissions, we account for 0.1% of the global carbon emission. But if the rest of the 99.9% carbon emission continues at this rate, the 100% of Singapore actually will be inundated. So we have every interest for our own existence to encourage, to facilitate global action. And it has to be global action because we are so small. Actions by ourselves alone is definitely not sufficient. So how do we be part of the global movement and encourage the rest of the world to get along with us to also move towards this net zero? We have many allies, and we have seen more and more of them announcing their targets. But let's be very, very clear and honest about it. While many countries have that options to say, I'll go net zero, there are many, many countries that are really struggling. I think in today's Straits Times, the EVP Timmermans for EU said this very nice quote. It says that, countries like the EU can talk about transition of energy from fossils or coal to renewable. But many countries are asking, where is my energy? So it's a real reality that for many developing countries, if you say that, the next power plant has to be built to the highest standards, then maybe they have to sacrifice power for 5 provinces and only have 1. That's the reality that we have to face with. So in getting global agreement and global consensus, we have to ensure that this decision is an inclusive one. We want the developed countries to play their part, to channel some of the resources for adaptation and also for mitigation so that the developing countries have a chance to also enjoy the fruit of development. It's not just about setting a standard and that's set by developed country and then the rest of the world has to follow. It has to be an inclusive process in order for this global movement to be a successful one. It's the same as in Singapore with economy. That's the reason why we have this green plan. The green plan is not just a carbon plan. It's not just a race to zero carbon plan. We want to reach there, but the process we recognize that actually it has to be an inclusive one because many businesses, many sectors will be affected. If we move too fast, it will make our businesses less competitive. And you know, Singapore, if we are less competitive as a place for doing business, companies will go away because we don't have the size of the market to attract companies to come here for, they don't come here for our markets, right, domestic market. They come here because we are a good place to do business. We are a hub in many, many sectors. So we have to always keep an eye on our economic competitiveness, move at a pace, take the low-hanging fruit, no regrets move, but at the same time ensuring that you know, our businesses are not too far off from the rest of the curve and be penalized. We are also producers of many fossil products, many plastics, and our products are actually used in the renewable energy sectors. So for example, if you're talking about photovoltaic cells, many of the plastics and chemical products that come out of Jurong Island are actually input elements into these products. So we are also plugged into the new renewable sectors. But obviously, because of how the carbon is counted in Singapore, but we are actually producing for the rest of the world. What we are seeing now actually is an opportunity. As the world is moving in that direction, as the large markets are signaling very strongly, markets such as EU has always been there, leading the fort. We are seeing China coming in, Japan coming in, South Korea coming in, and of course, US have also rejoined Paris Agreement after Trump administration. This signal is important because it's telling us about the market potential. So I think for the SME, it's as much as defensive and as offensive interest. In other words, if you look at your supply, you're supplying to your customers, and if you're looking at the customer's demand, if your customers are the European MNCs, are the Japanese MNCs, if the Korean MNCs, you will find that actually the demand for sustainable products is going to increase. It's defensive because if you do not be part of this sustainable sort of standards, you may be lagging behind, and soon you may find yourself locked out of the market. There's clear signal of that, and therefore it's very important for us to move the entire economy, all sectors, whether you are in petrochemicals, whether you are in paper, whether you are in services, to move them along the way so that we can not only defend their markets, but actually ride the wave and be proactive in capturing the new markets that's going to come our way. I would say that the government is doing that, as I mentioned earlier on, particularly with our procurement. We are requiring companies to have sustainability products, sustainable reporting and measurement. And we hope that this will be a way for us to negotiate. The Green Plan actually is a way to negotiate all these differences in interests and also the differences in impacts so that we can move together. It is not something that the government can just set a few laws, because it involves how companies do their business, how companies measure their profitability, how companies select their investment projects. If the investment company has no requirement on environmental conditions, then obviously I think the choice of investments will be quite different. So we want all parties to be part of this, and including consumer, who also want to choose wisely so that they be part of the sustainability movement. I would just say that there's a factor, that's a force that's helping us from the back, and that's coming from the financial sector. I think increasingly central banks around the world are beginning to calculate and measure climatic risk. If there's sea level rise, if there's extreme weather, how would that affect the property risks and also the asset risks of their portfolio? And that's helpful because I think they're sending a signal to the banks, to the financiers, and to investors that climatic risks have to be considered, And also, if we are looking at 2050 being a fossil-free or low-carbon future, then many of the fossil assets may have, diminution in value. And with that in mind, with the kind of trajectory in mind, I think it's all the central banks, financial institutions, investment companies are doing their calculation. So this is a whole transition and whole adjustments that's going on, and I think that's helpful for climate action.
Definitely, well, the whole ecosystem have to, work together. And apart from the financial, the investor, public sector, and I think one part of the whole value chain are doing something very exciting. They are the innovators. Okay, just now we talked about technology solutions. Without it, it's very hard for us to move the needles. We have made a bold pledge, and that ambitious goal actually drive us to really work very hard to scout for innovation and technology. We actually share at our the World City Summit that two very exciting innovations that we are looking at. One is turning waste into building materials, and hopefully plastic waste can be turned into ingredients for sand and concrete as well. This is being piloted, right now. We are testing it. Then the other one is actually plastic neutrality for building as a certification. So we are working on both now, and we hope to be able to, drive positive change and also tap onto new technologies and all that. And High Commissioner, Canada is quite known for some of the technologies. You have the BlackBerry, you have some of the very exciting innovation. So do you want to share with us how Canada is also stepping up in, innovation and technology?
Thank you, Esther. So certainly the area of sustainable technology and clean and green tech is really a very vibrant and growing sector in the Canadian economy. Interestingly, because of the question one of the audience posed, most of our, I think upwards to over 90% of the companies in the sector in Canada are SMEs. So we always knew that the Canadian economy mirrored that in the sense of the Singapore economy in terms of a lot of SMEs who were in the technological space, but certainly in the sustainable and green tech side, we really see that. And some of the challenges, of course, are the commercialization questions that the minister raised. But I think what we're finding is the contribution that these innovative ideas can make in the fight against climate change are really quite inspiring. And we've really certainly taken advantage of the role that Singapore plays as a hub in the region and a support for these innovative companies coming here. We launched a Canadian Tech Accelerator at the High Commission a couple of years ago. And through that, we've brought cohorts, both physical but also virtual lately, in the areas of ag tech and clean tech and green tech to meet with and talk to Singaporean partners and find ways to both use technology here in Singapore, but also with Singaporean partners into the greater Southeast Asian and Asia-Pac region. So I'll just mention two because we're talking about buildings and development. One is Carbon Cure, which has recycling CO2 technology for concrete manufacturing. And so Carbon Cure is working with Pan United Corporation to expand that technology through the Asia-Pacific region. And another down at Gardens by the Bay is Tarragon, which transforms combustible materials into thermal energy that can be then used on site. And so that's being used down at Gardens by the Bay. There's many others, but we really value as I say, the important role that Singapore plays as being a safe and sort of, I guess, helpful conduit for Canadian companies, while geographically distant, to come into the region and hopefully partner with and share the technology in the global fight to combat climate change. So I think, from a government point of view, what we try and do is provide the financial support in order to get them launched, and then some of the also trying to give some advice in terms of how to go and scale up and commercialize. But I would say that's an area where we still have a lot to learn from some of our other international partners, and so it's an ongoing conversation in Canada, and we look forward to continuing that discussion with our friends in Singapore. Thank you.
Okay, Max. business case of innovation technology, how do you think that you make it a stronger business case to really accelerate movement of innovation and technology application?
Yeah, sure. I mean, to me, it's a very clear business case. I think we've talked about the why, and everybody, I think, is on board as to why we're doing this. We're talking about what, which includes collaboration. Now it's the how, and how do you incentivize, if you will, people to take this on. So, when we have conversations with businesses, there are very strategic questions that are now being asked, right? How does a business embrace ESG? What are the material issues? What are your priorities? And it's not the same answer for every business, as Minister pointed out, because it depends on which sector you're in, how deep are you into it, and what are the opportunities? And then what are the costs? Because the technologies, even though are developing very, very rapidly, still needs time to commercialize. Then the conversation should also shift towards how do we leverage on the opportunities and to maximize the benefits that will come about as everybody drives towards a sustainable world. So these are the things that will, I think, encourage businesses and to move them forward, because once they see that, it's the opportunities that will drive innovation and entrepreneurship. And it has always been, and it always will, and that's what businesses will move towards. So I think we started off sustainability by having what we call reporting-led conversations, which is still important, right? You need to report it. But now I think we need to pivot to a value-based conversation. When you have a value-based conversation, that's when everybody gets pushed forward towards that ultimate objective.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I think when you change habit, you need, the consumers, the general public to be on board. WWF has been pushing for, sustainable packaging and all. And this actually came from the audience as well, that, COVID has highlighted our society's dependency on single-use disposable, be it plastic or takeaway container. Past efforts have mainly been educational and voluntary, which reap some good results, but more can be done. So asking for civil society's view and also government's view as well. Yeah, so Raghu, do you want to start first?
Yes, I think use of plastics is one of the issues that we are facing, and it's faced all over the world and also in Singapore. We have been working with civil society, with businesses on an initiative called the PACT initiative, which is called Plastic Action Initiative. It is aligned with the NEA's Say Yes to Waste Less campaign. And through the Plastic Action Initiative, we have successfully managed to help businesses avoid 85 million pieces of plastic packaging every year, right? So these are the sort of initiatives that we need to run, which help local businesses understand, firstly, what their consumption pattern is like, what are the practical steps that they can take to reduce the consumption. Therefore, it will help them save cost as well. So it is not just a burden that we are talking about. It is also mechanisms of how they can use less so that their overall cost of production is lower. Now, recently, we are currently working on another report with the retail sector, looking at the waste generated from the retail industry, whether it be supermarkets and stores within malls. And we are going to launch this report soon, which showcases what can businesses in malls do to reduce their waste production. So I think there will be a lot of collaborative effort that will be required to drive change. But when you look at the issues in detail, you will find that there are many low-hanging fruit, as the Minister explained, that can be easily captured and that can really help us move forward in the journey in a very significant fashion.
Mm-hmm. Right, indeed, sustainable living is one of the 5 pillars of Green Plan. So, Minister, you can expect that the arrow come back to you now. How can we, really encourage Singaporeans, to change the old habit, to adopt a more sustainable lifestyle?
I suppose really working with all parties, whether it's company or NGOs, and that's the reason why we think that Green Plan cannot be just a government's plan. It has to be a whole-of-nation plan, because it involves changing our individual lifestyle and consumption pattern. And I don't think the government can be telling everybody what to do, and that shouldn't be the case. So we should really understand what's important, our own impact on climate, and have that motivation from within. And that has to be really starting from the values of the society. What do we as a society think about our consumption of resources on the planet, and have a very clear realization that our consumption as we stand today cannot be sustained by the planet because we are consuming too much, we are emitting too much carbon dioxide. Something has to give, something has to change. And that change must come from every one of us because it's how we buy things, how we consume things, how we fly, how we commute. If we carry on the same way as it is, nothing will change because the company will continue to produce the same way that we are buying. We want low cost, products. We want to consume as much as we can. Then it will be status quo. So that change must come from each one of us, starting with the basic level, at the individual level, at the family level. I just want to say something about plastics. I think plastics has actually as a material is very, very useful and very functional. It serves it has many properties that serves many functions. If you look at COVID period, plastics help us protect ourselves. Even the disposables allow us to distribute bentos to migrant workers, for example, in a very hygienic, contactless way. So plastics itself, low cost, lightweight, waterproof, many good properties, right? If we say that we don't plastics, then my question will be, what would be the alternative? In paper, is it wood? Is it some reusable material? Yes, but are we going to reuse that? If we use alternative material and then we still throw away after one use, then I think we're consuming even more resources. So the problem with plastic really is a disposal one. How do we dispose our plastics so that it doesn't pollute the planet, doesn't pollute the landfill that the plastics go to in many countries, it doesn't pollute the river system and the ocean. So I think we need to be quite clear-minded about that. Of course, I think from the government, we are tackling packaging use. How do we do better packaging with less plastic, less resources used? And if you think about it, without plastic as a material, I think we will have a lot of food waste in the transportation and logistical processes. So we need to think very clearly. I mean, sustainability is one where it's very complex. When you try to calculate the CO2 and calculate other things, we have to look at the entire equation and ask ourselves what is the best way to manage this. So we want to do the right thing. We want to reduce the use, not totally ban it because we don't see good alternatives out there. And we also see its repercussion. If we ban plastics, there will be repercussion on hygiene, it will be cost of living, for example, on even food waste, right? But we also want to make sure that we collect all the plastics that we can. And right now, I think our focus is also to harness as much resources out of plastics. In the past, very often, I think in the sort of regional setting, plastics, recyclable plastics are exported to some of these recycling companies in the region. And that has changed over the last few years because more and more countries are stopping importation of plastic recyclables. So very often we see that the alternative actually is to landfill or incinerate in our case. So our plastic recycling rate is actually not good. We're not happy with it. We want to see that moving up. And in order to do so, we need to have our own recycling capability. We don't have very good recycling capability in Singapore. And this is where we are putting our R&D money on. We're going to look at what will be the recycling activities that can give us maximum value out of it. Is it back into oil? Is it back into some other alternative? These are all the questions that we are asking our scientific and academic community to think about. In the journey that's going ahead, the government will be there to invest in R&D because some of the R&D involves very long-term, it involves risks that corporates are not able to bear. So the government will have to come in to invest in some of these R&D. But increasingly, we find that companies are also prepared to look at sort of open innovation opportunities, partnering with us to have commercial research lab in our universities to jointly carry out some of these R&D that's of commercial interest to them. Increasingly, we see partnership between universities as well, because each one of us may be leading in some aspects of the sciences, but we are looking for solutions that need an amalgamation and an integration of all the sciences. Ultimately, sustainability is really system engineering. It's really putting all the pieces together. If I want to grow better fish, I need biology, I need chemistry, I need people that's in water system. So it's really the different sciences that has to come together to optimize the resources that we use. So we are looking for that kind of collaboration so that each of us do not need to start from zero. We can really leverage on each other's strength and to find the solution that we need as quickly as possible, adapting to our local context. And this is where very interesting, because as we talk to countries like Canada or many countries that are represented here, many of them have good solutions that is designed for their temperate climate. But in the tropics, we need our own sort of solutions, and this is where I think that collaboration is, is increasingly exciting to us as a commercial opportunities. Products that is suited for a certain set of climatic conditions. If you need adaptation to the tropics, to Southeast Asia, we would be a good base to do the adaptation. And increasingly, we look forward to that kind of collaborative opportunities.
Well, definitely. We have about 5 minutes left, and there are quite a few questions that actually have been more or less addressed, through the discussion. And of course, as Ken Hickson also talked about the life cycle approach, and we really have to look at from the upstream, how we design, how we source for material, how we produce, and how we engage the consumer, and last but not least, the end of the whole life cycles, the disposal, and all that. So one more question for everyone, that is like, sustainability is now really mainstream, and we have actually seen that MSG has been renamed for almost 1 year now, almost 1 year's anniversary. It was July 27 last year. So if we have to look back to the impact of this name change, and also the green plan for almost half a year now, right, since February until now, close to 5-6 months. So when you look back, are you happy with the progress, and what do you think are the areas that we can do better from the minister's perspective, and also from the 3 panelists in your own area? How we can do better and accelerate. The green plan is a living plan. We can't expect it to achieve everything over 1 year, but we have seen, MSC, I actually follow your LinkedIn, Minister. You've been running around, I think probably you don't really sleep much, huh? So you are going to, you go to the food security, water, waste, factory, high-tech factory, or even small, innovator. So when you look back, how was this 1 year, and are you happy with the progress?
Thank you very much for this question. This is my second tour of duty to MSE. My first tour was 2011 to 2015. So I've seen the ministry in over the last decade, and I would say that the momentum has never been quicker than now. It is not just in Singapore, as I mentioned earlier. Multinationals are looking at it. The big companies, the big investors like Temasek, BlackRock, they have ESG quite firmly implanted. We have also seen, as I mentioned, central banks taking action. And we have seen the UN, for example, getting many countries to pledge more ambitious targets. So I think the momentum is really, I would say, that has gathered over the last 1 year. In Singapore, the SGP is exceptionally exciting and gratifying to me, because it is not an MSE plan. For many of you who have worked with the government for some time, you will know, actually sometimes between the ministries, we do a lot of negotiations as well. And the Green Plan actually is a product of the negotiation. So actually it is a product not just between ministries, between state boards, it's also a negotiation within the ministry, to be very frank. Because if you look at MSE alone, for example, if I want water security, which is such an important issue for Singapore, right? Particularly if you look at all these climatic conditions that's going out there, the swing is getting so wild. We get so much more rain and then so much little rain in other times. And in Singapore, we don't have a large area to collect the water. So getting water security sort of firmly in place in our plan has been the R&D targets for the last 3 decades, right? But if you think about it from a carbon point of view, it doesn't make sense. Because if I'm using desalination and water reclamation as our 3rd and 4th tap, those are carbon producing taps, right? Much better for me to buy more from the region. So when we come up with a Singapore Green Plan, actually these trade-offs are sort of negotiated. And that is why I'm very optimistic that going forward, I think the speed at which the government is moving, particularly in embedding sustainability in the policies, not just in MSE, but in other related ministries as well, whether it's MTI on energy, MOT on transportation, EV, electrification of transportation, provision of public transportation, or whether it's in MND, in built environment. All these trade-offs within the ministries, between the state boards, actually culminated in the Singapore Green Plan. So like all sustainability and environment projects or infrastructure projects, it's very, very long dated. I just opened the floating solar farm today with Prime Minister. This project started in 2016. So it takes us 5 years to get that to where it is today. So many of the infrastructure project is going to be like that. It's very long dated. So whatever we are seeing now, I'm sitting really on the shoulders of my predecessors who have worked so hard to bring these projects to fruition. So similarly, we are hoping that this generation, this group of people here will start laying the seeds, build the foundations for the next generation in a much more sustainable and solid way.
Thank you. This is a really good final thoughts. And I mean, I also, ask High Commissioner to share your final thoughts.
Yes, thank you. I would just note in terms of engaging with Singaporeans over the past year, I too have seen as I say, that enhanced momentum. And I guess my final thought is just coming back to the Minister's comments about the next generation and how that's where, certainly in Canada, the focus is how to ensure that becomes ingrained into the way that the next generation is being educated and the businesses are growing and so forth. And I wanted to just note as well, my friend James So at the back of the room with the National Youth Achievement Awards, who has been a wonderful collaborator with Canada on a variety of issues, including Arctic and the environment. And I think it's through partnerships like that certainly we'll see the role of trying to ensure international collaboration to move forward in our shared goal and learn from each other. So I think sometimes we look at Singapore with some envy because of being able to pull a plan together and to put in a solar floating farm in 5 years. What I can say is in my country, sometimes infrastructure takes a little bit longer, and negotiations at sub-federal levels sometimes take a little longer than that. So we look with admiration and look to learn from how Singapore can pull and implement a plan together so well and so effectively. So I hope that cross-collaboration can continue. Thank you.
Great. WWF, your aspiration, final thoughts.
Thank you. My aspiration is to involve the youth in this whole initiative. I think there is a huge role that they can play, and they need to play, because after our generation, it is they who will be taking the leadership, and this is the world that they will inherit from us. So I think it is timely that we work hard in involving the youth. Currently, we have a program ongoing with Temasek called We Got This. And the idea is to impart both sustainability skills as well as digital skills to the youth. And through this, what they will realize is how they can bring the different skills together to influence change and make the world a better place for us all.
Yes, wonderful. And we've been working with you with NLB as well at the My Treehouse Green Library. And we are targeting not just the youth, but the kids, 3 to 12 years old, because I think that will be easier to shape mindset. So Max, you are facing the toughest audience, all the people who want to put priority on profits making and all. So what is your aspiration for the next laps of action?
I think there's still ways to go, but I think we've sort of shared a lot of positive stories and illustrations of initiatives that are going on. So I think I also am optimistic that we will get there. Now, don't ask me when, but we'll get there. That's one way of looking at it. But at the end of the day, in order to drive outcomes, everything that we do must have an impact. If not, it will just go away. So, CDL, trailblazer company in sustainability, even linking executive rewards, right, to sustainability metrics. I think that has an impact, can be a role model. Singtel went into a credit-linked credit facility, whereby their interest rates are premised on meeting sustainability metrics. So if they meet those sustainability metrics, they get a discount on the interest rates. Now that has an impact. So when we have more and more of these things, I think we will move in the right direction. Maybe as a last statement, we can go back to what the World Economic Forum talked about, right? For businesses, we're moving away from shareholder primacy to stakeholder capitalism and long-term sustainable value.
Definitely. And in fact, just now you mentioned, Minister, the central bank. In fact, MAS, is in the audience as well. And they have actually issued their first sustainability report. Very, very good report as well. And we have SGX in the audience, and Temasek is also in the audience. I think we need, to bring everybody in the ecosystem to step up, action. And we hope that, when more people visit our climate action exhibition, it will also enhance the public awareness. With greater awareness, we can expect greater action and greater impact for a more sustainable future. With this, thank you very much for this, the panelists, and for the audience attention. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to all our panelists for sharing your valuable insights from your various sectors. Mr. Fu and Ms. An, please remain on stage for the next segment of the program. High Commissioner, Mr. Loh and Mr. Raghunathan, may I please invite you back to your seats to enjoy the rest of the program. And for the next segment, may I please invite back on stage Mr. Sherman Kwek and also Mr. Kenneth Thank you. Now, as we all know, the global pandemic has accelerated digital connectivity across borders. So, we have produced a 3D virtual tour of our Climate Action exhibition to reach out to a global audience. Now, we hope that visitors from all around the world will join us in Singapore to change the present and save the future. Now, may we please have Minister Fu to launch both the physical and digital climate action exhibition on my countdown. 3, 2, 1. Indeed, we can all change the present and save the future. Thank you, Minister Fu, Mr. Kwek, and Mr. for opening the exhibition. Now, the virtual tour is now live on www.cdlsustainability.com. Now it's time for a group photo. If you can just spend a few seconds giving us your widest smile behind your masks. Wonderful. May I please invite you back to your seats? Now, to our virtual guests based in Singapore, we highly encourage you to visit the exhibition in person at the CDL Green Gallery at Singapore Botanic Gardens and join us in the pledge to support the Singapore Green Plan 2030. Now, for everyone in this room, let us all take a group photo. I would just want to request for those sitting at the back two rows to please stand up so that we can see your beautiful faces on the camera. We've got our photographers on stage right now. So if you're sitting in the last two rows, please stand up, stagger yourselves, make sure you can see the camera. And perhaps if you're sitting at the extreme ends as well, it would be helpful for you to stand up. Thank you.
Okay, we look at this camera first.
Everyone can smize. If you're at the edges, it would be helpful if you can move in. Thank you. Big smiles. Thank you very much. Thank you to our hardworking photographers especially. Now, we have come to the end of the opening event, so thank you everyone who has joined us here in the hall, as well as online. Now, for guests here with us, we will start the tour of the exhibition by batches in groups of 10 every 3 to 5 minutes in accordance with safe distancing measures. May I now please invite our guest of honor, Minister Fu and entourage, to proceed to the entrance. For the rest of us in this room, we seek your understanding and patience as we will invite you to proceed to the gallery once it is ready to do so. For our virtual guests, the exhibition is open every day from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. until March next year. Otherwise, the exhibition is now live on www.cdlsustainability.com. Now for the guests here, please enjoy the videos that we have prepared for you that will be flashed on screen in just a moment, as well as the refreshments on the table. Now, in line with our exhibition, we encourage you to properly recycle all the post-event items. We do have recycling bins outside. We kindly remind you to remain seated and avoid from intermingling with guests from other tables. My name is Charlotte May. Take care and see you again.